Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers have a major roster crunch. How can they uncrunch it? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. No matter how or where you get your podcasts, this one's always free and never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 24,000 subscribers, Andy, all of whom are wondering how the Lakers are going to find a little bit of flexibility to maybe make some adjustments with the roster. We'll get into that, some comments left on the YouTube page. A little bit of summer league stuff. Do want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting the way we would want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. This whole we got 15 guys, Andy. It's hard to make roster improvements when you don't have anywhere to put anyone. The Lakers have 15 guys on their roster. They would have to figure out how to make a trade. I guess they could stretch people. They could do something like that to open up a little bit of room. But these things are tricky to do. Like when you look at Andy at the roster, it's the 3 one-year guys that I think people are looking to try to sell. Is that where you would start? Just trying to dump, literally dump some of those types of guys?
I would think so, just because, at least in theory, they are the simplest, if not necessarily most palatable things to do, because it's not a particularly complicated trade to find somebody to absorb a minimum level contract into their cap space or just onto their roster, because it's not even a matter of cap space when it comes to veteran minimum guys. It's just finding a willing partner, offering them a little bit of sweetener, as opposed to trying to construct a roster with larger salaries. It starts getting more complicated. You start talking about bigger commitments for another team to consider, or like as we've seen with some of the trades involving Klay Thompson or DeMar DeRozan, where one team took back basically no salary because they wanted to create trade exceptions, or they're in a place right now where they're thinking about rebuilding and they don't want anything of big commitments on their books, stuff like that. You know, it may not feel particularly pleasant to attach a second or two just to get Christian Wood or Cam Reddish or Jackson Hayes off your books. Like, you're not going to like doing that, particularly if you're a team like the Lakers that is not going to be confused with the Thunder anytime soon when it comes to just, a treasure chest of assets.
Having a lot of stuff.
No, they are not a proverbial he who dies with the most toys wins type of a team right now. But these are not difficult moves to make. And once you especially start reaching a place where Rob Pelinka feels like he has to, in order to even start getting serious about some potentially larger deals, that's where I would think you'd start. Because, other than just deciding we're going to stretch and waive a guy, which at that point it's just, how much longer do you want to keep paying a guy not to play, which is truly the easiest thing to do. Yeah, salary dumping one of these guys is where I expect things to start.
Yeah, and it's tricky because, also to the stretch, you don't get that full savings, and it becomes tricky with the aprons and all these other things. And so there are a lot of considerations there. If you look at it, you mentioned it. The part of the problem, it's not that you can't find a team that's willing to take a second rounder to get rid of Cam Reddish, who was the absolutely 100% the first person I'd put on this list as like the player, particularly as I at least try to imagine what I think JJ Redick's, offense and things like that are going to look like. I just don't see, I think everybody knows who watches the show, not a big believer in Cam Reddish.
No, you've made that very unsubtly clear.
Yeah. I'm trying to keep people guessing, but I guess I just haven't done a very good job. The problem is like when it's the assets because, you mentioned Oklahoma City. They can attach a second round pick to anything. Like if they want to bump themselves up the line at Chick-fil-A, they can throw in a couple second rounders and move to the front of the line. Like they can do that. They have so many. They have all of the second rounders. The Lakers, if you look at their future draft, they have an extra 2025 second rounder coming in from the Clippers. So that's a +1. Unfortunately, they have their 2026 going to Miami. Second rounder. Their 2028 goes to either Orlando or Washington, and their 2029 goes to Washington. So, that's 3 of their future picks are already out the door. And so it actually is.
Am I remembering this really quickly off the top of my head correctly? Are those going to Washington specifically as part of offloading Kendrick Nunn with the Rui Hachimura deal?
1/23/23 is the date of the Lakers Washington. I forget the parameters of which deal that was, but the Lakers 2029 second round pick to Washington.
Okay.
It could be. Go look up what happened on January 23rd, 2023. I think that was the big.
That sounds right about when they traded for Rui.
It could be 2028.
Well, the reason I even bring that up at all is it speaks to another example of, while it was obviously worth it to get Rui because Rui was a decided upgrade over Kendrick Nunn, it was part of undoing the mistake that was Kendrick Nunn, and it feels indicative of undoing the mistakes that were Reddish, that were Wood.
It does look like both 2028 and 2029 were conveyed in the same deal, and that must be
right. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Okay, yeah, that's a great point. And like I said, I can't remember what happened yesterday, and I didn't look up the impetus for that. But yeah, it's the same thing in January 2023. It's got to be that. So you don't have a lot of stuff, and while it sounds like a simple thing and a nothing burger to just attach a pick, to attach 2030, to attach 2031, whatever you're allowed to do, get rid of Cam Reddish, open up a minimum roster spot. What does that do? Like, who are you getting? Are you getting Cam Reddish? You understand my question. It's like, if you're going to make that sacrifice, and it is a sacrifice, not just in the idea of, oh, it's a player we're going to draft in 5 years. No, it's an asset that you can only, as you like to point out, what I like to say, you can only trade it once. And if your return,
it's an asset for now. It's not necessarily a player in 5 years. It's an asset for right this second.
If your return isn't going to be a player that you think is going to play, a minimum, contract guy, it actually would make more sense probably to wait until later in the summer to try to see who is left without a chair. And then you burn a second round. But you do it now, you may end up, kind of trying to force somebody in there. My point here is there is a real cost for the Lakers that goes to try to dump Cam Reddish. That second rounder, 2 second rounders to dump Reddish and Christian Wood, if that's what they want to do. Like, that is a real cost for this team. That is something that they have to consider.
Well, I mean, it also, and we can talk about this more after the break, it also speaks to, as Rob Pelinka looks to try to, reconfigure, upgrade this roster as much as he possibly can, dealing with the constrictions that he's navigating. It also speaks to why you really want to avoid having to undo your own mistakes, because unfortunately for Rob Pelinka, that is where he objectively often does his best work, is when he undoes bad decisions, which on one hand, good for you for being resourceful. On the other hand, stop making mistakes, bro.
Yeah. So let's get into a little bit of that next, and a little bit of a couple comments that I thought were interesting on the YouTube page. So we'll do that next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by BetterHelp. There can be a tendency in life to play the comparison game when you're constantly judging your life against the lives of friends, acquaintances, enemies, even strangers. And your life never seems to stack up. Social media plays a huge role in this doom loop where we're always peeking into the highly curated version of other people's worlds. And even though we all know Facebook is not real life and nobody posts their worst days on Instagram, this stuff can weigh you down. And therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what other people have, so you can start living your best life. And I can personally speak to how much talking with a professional therapist helped me and my family during a really difficult period. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible, suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
Well, I'm not reporting this as like a thing that like is going around or whatever, but like when you start to try to imagine how the Lakers can make room, it actually, and again, not condoning this as a course of action, but it becomes actually one of the things, depending on how you could construct it, who you can route to where, and all these other things, that at least makes me think about the possibilities of a LaVine trade or something like that. Because, and again, I still come down to no, but the larger question is like, could a trade be an avenue, especially if it's somebody like, if the Bulls get desperate enough and there's no indication that they are, to actually start attaching picks to LaVine to get him off their payroll. The Lakers, then you get picks, you open up roster spots, you clear, like there are some practical advantages that at least you would have to do the scales of justice against, oh my God, Zach LaVine makes a ton of money for the next few years. I'm not saying you come out ahead, but in undoing mistakes, you have to start thinking about these types of things, which are suboptimal fixes, but might be preferential to dumping, using picks to dump players or all those kinds of other things.
Yeah, let somebody else dump their picks on you for the privilege of taking on the contract they don't want. I mean, we can get more into Zach LaVine specifically and those pros and cons. If it actually starts seeming like it's a real thing as opposed to something people have wondered about publicly on social media reports and whatnot.
I don't think it's going to become one, which is why I bring up the hypothetical.
Right. I don't think it's going to become one either. And also from the Lakers' perspective, and this is where it starts getting really complicated, like the idea of what are you looking to do as a result of the LaVine deal? Because if you are looking to start stockpiling moving forward, like you think we're going to try to be as competitive as possible for, say, the next 2 years of LeBron and AD. But in our heart of hearts, we don't think the odds of winning a championship are particularly high or even moderately high. So while we are going to sincerely try to be competitive, we're going to look to replenish for even just the post-LeBron, we still have AD period, trying to upgrade there. The problem with LaVine, though, is forget his contract. Like, I don't know if he is that much of an upgrade over D'Angelo Russell in totality, especially when you take into account he's hurt way more than
also
D'Angelo
too,
Russell.
it's because it's also D'Angelo plus. Like,
right,
you can't
exactly.
get there. So, and this is the issue. Like this is an issue. The Lakers, it's not just you're giving up players, it's you're giving up important players. You're giving up players that matter. So yes, Zach LaVine, let's even stipulate Zach LaVine is a good player. Like I think it is possible to bleep on him to the point where you're like, okay, it's a little bit like the Trae Young thing. It's like, I got a lot of problems with Trae Young and I wouldn't want to build a team around him, but let's not turn him into the worst player of all time. He's not trash.
But if you were confident that Zach LaVine, overpaid as you might find him, like he's durable, like Russell Westbrook, say whatever you will about him, Russ does not miss games particularly often. Like Russ pretty much plays in every game. If you could say that about Zach LaVine, I think it could be easier to stomach that contract particularly if you're getting picks on top of it to take it on. The problem, I think, with LaVine, we don't have to go much further on this discussion, but
Sure.
I do think it speaks to the complications Pelinka faces. I'm not sure Zach LaVine actually helps them in the present the way that they want to. Like, LaVine to me is probably more helpful if your main goal is to replenish assets than to actually be better this and next season and the following year.
I can see the argument, but he's certainly probably not better than 2 or 3 members of your rotation, even if you're getting so, unless you think you can use those roster spots on players that are better. But I just don't see that out there for the Lakers, or really any team who would be working with the same financial parameters. A couple interesting things that we saw on the speaking of like roster space and stuff like that. We got a comment from the Trib One on the YouTube page where he noted that we were talking about Bronny's contract, that his contract is the league minimum. Bronny's contract doesn't really have anything to do with our cap situation. Same goes with Maxwell Lewis, who's on the same deal, more or less, as Bronny. Dalton and Jalen, meaning Connect and Hood Schifino, realistically affect our cap. And this is true. But I think, it's important. Like right now, the Lakers have a roster. It's a roster spot issue. It's a space issue more than it is a cap issue. My questions about Bronny have nothing to do with how he impacts their salary cap. And again, I am not anti-Bronny getting the deal that he got. I mean, I know it's a point of controversy. It's just a question of, if in a different year, would the Lakers have given the 55th pick this year a guaranteed contract, or would they have tried to funnel that person into a two-way to keep one more roster spot open? I think there's certainly, given what's happened with the 3 guys who picked up their options, that is the basic criticism, because I think seeing it coming, they might have done that, or drafted a guy to keep in Europe for another year, or traded the pick for something extra next year, or whatever it might be. I think they might have
traded the pick for you to take on Cam Reddish.
Possibly. I think they are something. I think they might have tried to use that in a way that left a roster spot open. Yeah. But again, it is not a criticism of them signing Bronny James or anything like that. It's just, I think,
this was a complicated year for Bronny to turn pro.
Right. And again, that's less Bronny's fault than it is Rob's, but either way, the Lakers were in a bit of a bind there. And so, yeah, I don't know how they trade their way even out of this. Like, I feel like and we'll get into how good or bad this roster actually is. It is important, the inaction, I think, Andy, has put people in a mindset that the team is bad. And I'm not sure that's fair. But what to expect for next year is something I think we'll get into maybe for tomorrow's episode, or all that. Like, where is this roster that everybody seems to hate? But do you think, before we break for the next segment, do you think we're going to see anything before, I don't know, closer to training camp at the very least? If we're still sort of in it in terms of the early days of the offseason and player movement and all that kind of stuff, I think we're at the tail end of that. Do you think we're going to see anything before this portion of it closes, or any moves happen closer to the regular season?
I mean, I think there could maybe be some motion coming out of the actual summer league in Vegas, because that's, it's basically like Comic-Con for the NBA. And that's where everybody, including league execs, descends upon Vegas. And there is a lot of talking that goes on there. So I think there's a possibility that maybe some stuff gets loosened up after or during summer league, just because you have so many people in the same space. And even if the ball doesn't get rolling with a deal specifically involving the Lakers, there's always the butterfly effect of one move setting up another, setting up another, setting up another. But it is certainly possible that this could be the roster more or less when training camp opens, because we've seen Rob Pelinka do that before. When, take the Russell Westbrook his last, half season with the Lakers, basically everybody other than I think you and me were insisting that Rob had to move Russ before training camp began. Like, he just has to. There's no way you can bring Russell Westbrook into this training camp. We're too far gone. And you and I both kept insisting, like, no, I mean, I think it would be ideal, but
right. And both of us were pro heel Turner deal.
Yeah. Yes, very much so. I thought that
and I think ultimately they would have been better off with that, even not being able to predict exactly what the roster would look like, simply because they'd have Miles Turner.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but other than Hield and Turner, there was no rumored deals that came up, whether during Russ's first full season with the Lakers at the deadline, or in the offseason, or during training camp, like whatever. There was nothing other than Hield and Turner that made me think Rob has to do this. Like, it's all of them, I thought it's better for Rob just to hold on to Russ and deal with it. So because of that, I feel like we've seen, for better or for worse, if you want to give Rob Pelinka, I think, an overarching compliment, he does not seem to allow external pressure to prompt him to make deals. And, maybe that's for the better, maybe it's for the worse, depending on how you look at it, but he does not seem to be the type of GM that allows the noise, externally. Yeah. Internally, I can't speak to it, but externally, the noise does not seem to prompt him to make moves.
Well, you know why, and I'll answer that question next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. We all love sports. We love them so much. We never want those sports to stop, but with the playoffs done in various leagues, you now get fewer games this time of year. And the sports, they're not sports in the way we want them to, but FanDuel lets you, lets me, lets all of us keep the sports going whenever we want. All you got to do, just open up the app, dream up some bets whenever you're in the mood. You got baseball, you got WNBA, you got options. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Okay, before I'll finish that thought on Rob, another comment that I thought was interesting on the YouTube page for Monday. This from Dead Diev 1718. Because we were talking on for Monday's show, kind of reacting to Dalton Connect, to Maxwell Lewis, to Bronny James, and just sort of the summer league vibe the Lakers were putting out there. And good God, those were some atrocious games the Lakers played on Saturday and Sunday. And Connect shot the ball horribly. But both of us kind of certainly didn't panic and advocated, I thought, for the good stuff that we saw about where the shots were coming from, how Connect got to them, some of the passes he made and things like that, trying to think of contextually how he'll look next to Anthony Davis and LeBron James, as opposed to next to that guy who plays in Germany and Bronny James and Colin Castleton, because that context matters. But Dead Diev wrote, as rookies, Lonzo and Kuz tore it up in summer league, even against second-year players. Sorry, it does make a difference. You responded to, I can either read your response, we can go from there, or you can just talk about why.
Go ahead and read it.
Okay. You wrote, sure, I've seen plenty of players who struggle as rookie go on to have strong careers. It's awesome when they do own the SPL as rookies, but it's not a red flag if they don't. That was our larger point. It is a red flag, however, when second-year guys struggle. That often signals trouble. And that, Andy, is why I was a little worried about Lewis, how he responded on Sunday with an offer. And not showing sort of the different tools than like just the explosive athleticism that we saw on Saturday. And why I'm kind of mildly disappointed in Castleton, because not only is he a second-year guy, he's also older.
I thought Castleton overall was fine. I thought at times he actually looked really good. He, like, just in terms of showing off the overall skill set that he has, I have concerns about him defensively and getting pushed around the lane, but overall with Castleton, there was nothing I saw that felt like a regression. If anything, it just felt like sort of a continuation of what we already know about him.
That's my point. I didn't see it. I wasn't like, second year guys in that league, especially an older player. I wanted to be like, ooh, okay. I see something better than I saw last year, different than I saw last year. And I didn't. It's 2 games early in the summer league season. There's a lot of time for that to change. I was just, like I said, mildly disappointed.
Right. The difference though is like the example with Lonzo Ball and Kyle Kuzma, and even to a lesser degree, Josh Hart really just crushing it during that one incredibly fun summer league for the Lakers. Diev is correct. That was really, really fun to see, and it felt really promising for those guys moving forward. And if once Vegas kicks off, Connect and Bronny kick ass, like that will be really exciting, and that will be something we will talk about a lot, because that makes you go like, oh, okay. Maybe they just were a little bit nervous to start. Maybe the Cali Classic was just thrown together and unorganized, like whatever. But it really is more significant more significant, maybe even indicative, good or bad, when you see these guys in second years. Like I remember Brandon Ingram. I don't remember off the top of my head how his rookie year summer league went, but I know that his rookie year, to a lot of casuals not watching him game in, game out, they looked at his numbers and thought that he was kind of overwhelming. I mean, there was even a lot of NBA pundits that I thought were much lower on Ingram than they should have been, or I think would have been if they watched him every game paying attention. But I do remember this second year summer league, he played 1 game, dominated the crap out of it, and the Lakers were like, all right, we've seen enough. That's in part why Lonzo and Kuzma and those guys got the opportunity to dominate so much. It's because they said, we've seen enough from BI. We know he's good.
It's also, I mean, like, you think BI is skinny now. Go back and look at the pictures of him as a rookie. Like, people, when they left their keys in the car, just slid Ingram in to unlock the door. I mean, that dude was skinny. I mean, he was 2-dimensional. I think he was
a human Slim Jim.
He was flat Stanley, I mean, basically. We can skip the Hurley thing. I mean, there was some, I guess, I'm not sure why eyebrows were raised. Dan Hurley, 6 years, $50 million at UConn. It's filled with incentives. It's the
including
contract.
Speaking engagements.
Nice work if you can get it.
My God, it's no wonder he took this deal.
It basically reinforces. It's like the Lakers offered a little more, or whatever, but it basically reinforces the idea the Lakers didn't offer enough to pull him away from that situation. And I don't think it shows. He played anybody. Didn't. I agree with him. And he says he didn't need leverage, but I see this almost like the non-storiness of it, to me, is the only thing that's interesting. But I wanted to answer that. You said something that I thought was interesting about Rob, where he says he doesn't overreact to public pressure. Internally, no idea. We don't what the pressure even is. That is good. But my working theory as to why is because ultimately there isn't that much pressure on him to respond. Public pressure comes from people who are upset with the product. Now, it's easy to overreact. The Lakers were in the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago. They won a title in 2020. It's not like they have been wildly uncompetitive over the last few years. But that said, I think part of the reason Pelinka is in a position to slow play or ignore a lot of the public pressure in a way, even if you would want GMs to do it, is because he's actually not under that much pressure. It's really hard for him to lose his job.
Well, I mean, I believe Jeannie Buss truly cares about winning another championship. And I think she truly cares about Jeannie Buss loves the Lakers. Like, she truly does. That is not something I doubt for a second. Like, that she truly loves this. It is in a lot of ways all she knows. Mm-hmm. Like, she grew up with this organization. I'm guessing from like maybe 13 on, 12 on. So I'm like, this is all she knows. But I'm not always convinced that she gives Rob complete carte blanche to do everything possible within, let's just remove how good of a GM you think Rob is. complete carte blanche for the greatest GM ever to do the best work possible. Like, you have to sometimes consider whether or not, more or less, Rob is working with within the parameters of what he is kind of told to do. And it's like, look,
yes, it's. I mean, let's think. I want to think about this a little bit overnight, because like this is a larger discussion that we don't have time to get into here. Like
if there are certain hard spending caps that Genie Bus, for example, is like, we are not going past X for
but
this.
Let's hold on to this, because so almost
just to define it for the people listening right now, so they understand what I mean.
How much of a box is Rob in?
Or
we're
like
talking about the boxes today.
Yeah, we're not putting all the data around you or all the minds around you. Like, part of the ring, there's always this school of thought that Rob Pelinka likes a small circle because there's nobody to usurp his power.
Maybe that's what he's allowed.
Right. I was going to say it, or it could be a bit of both. He could enjoy that, but he could recognize the advantages and the disadvantages of it. But
let's hold on to this. We'll talk a little about this. And I know like I said, we're going to get into this concept of whether or not the team unaltered is as bad as some people seem to be projecting. Disappointing does not necessarily equate to a bad team. LeBron himself said he thinks they're not that far off. So all of this coming up over the course of the rest of the week, and we will see everyone tomorrow.